The Boulder Cup is out and the Twilight Cup is in. Yeah, this is part one of my Twilight Cup Simplified information. So this part one here is going to be going over the initial setup and some of the best picks for this cup. And then part two, we'll go over all the picks that I don't talk about here today. So if you don't know what the Twilight Cup is, definitely go to the silph.gg and get learned up on what the Silph Arena is all about and getting hooked up with the Twilight Cup here. Every month, there's like a new themed cup that they go with that limits the meta to 4 specific types. So far, it's always been 4. In the Twilight Cup, it's Fairy, Poison, Dark, and Ghost. In the previous cup, the Boulder Cup, it was Fighting, Rock, Ground, and Steel. So that is just like the flavor of the month that they got going on here. So definitely check out this website if you want to know what's up. So as far as the Twilight Cup Simplified goes, originally the analysis was going to be a lot more simple, like really cut and dry. It was just Toxicroak, Skunktank, Golbat, and Tentacruel, and that's all you really needed to know. But then, on January 31st, right when I was about to do my live stream covering this content, Niantic updated the game. And they updated some moves for PvP. So they buffed Smackdown, which has made Smackdown Tyranitar worthwhile. They buffed Waterfall, which made Crawdaunt worthwhile. They also released Frostlass, so now Frostlass is definitely worth considering. They buffed Confusion, and Confusion Venomoth was already going to be pretty good for this cup, but I felt it was just like a tad too weak to really be like worthwhile or to be like just a solid pick. But then they buffed Confusion, and now it definitely is a solid pick. So good job, Venomoth. And they also gave Alolan Ninetales Psyshock, and they buffed Psyshock, and they also buffed Dazzling Gleam. So they basically took Alolan Ninetales from being a 0 in the Twilight Cup and made it a hero in the Twilight Cup. So because of that, my content was delayed. I already had weekend plans, and I don't know. I swear Niantic's listening in on me sometimes, and they're just like, how can we just like best mess with Ryan Swag right now? That's what's going on in Niantic's headquarters. Instead of fixing their bugs, they're just trying to find new ways to mess with me. And if you want to know more information about this update, link in the description to a video covering the full breadth of it. There were some nerfs associated with this that I wasn't exactly pleased with, and there were more move pool expansions than what I just mentioned here. Like Muck got Thunder Punch, which is good. So that's another move pool expansion that's relevant to the Twilight Cup. But there are tons of move pool expansions. So yeah, link in the description to that video. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be going over the best overall picks for the Twilight Cup meta here. These picks aren't the only picks that you can use on your team. You can use any of the Pokemon featured here. And there may be reasons to use some of the Pokemon I talk about in tomorrow's video, the part 2 video, that may inspire you to use them over the picks I mention here. You could use this video as a way to build a cookie cutter, really good team, or you could also use this video to challenge your team against, like, mentally when you're making your own decisions. So yeah, keep that in mind when going through it. And another thing I want to mention before I get into it is that this is a simplified graphic. So all the matchups featured here don't behave precisely as shown. For example, the dark types here do pretty well against the ground types that aren't Toxicroak, right? And then the grass types here don't do so well against Toxicroak, but they do well against these guys. So it's like everything isn't 100% clear cut. So just keep that in mind when using this graphic. The main reason why I make these simplified graphics like this that do have some obvious flaws to them is just to help people with their team building process, because if you want to know the details, well then you're absolutely going to go for the details, but if you just want a general idea, well that's why you'd exclusively use a graphic like this. So yeah, keep that in mind when using this. So to start out, the best overall pick, the number 1 Pokemon that I feel really isn't an option, like you absolutely want to include this guy on your team, is Toxicroak. Yeah, Toxicroak is by far the best Pokemon in the Twilight Cup. It's kind of like the Skarmory of the Twilight Cup meta, if you will, where if you're not beating Toxicroak, you're very likely losing to Toxicroak. Toxicroak has Counter, Mud Bomb, and Sludge Bomb to just basically hit everything in the meta. Its main claim to fame is having the Mud Bomb, because then it's able to dominate other poison types with the ground type coverage. Counter helps it out against the dark types, and then Sludge Bomb is just kind of like a general powerful neutral hit that I feel is more useful than Dynamic Punches in this particular meta. So absolutely want to include Toxicroak on your team. Major issue that Toxicroak has is this group over here. So how do you best deal with this group? Well, by using the number 2 Omega pick Ryan Swag has for you today, and that is SmackDown Tyranitar. So getting a 1500 SmackDown Tyranitar might be pretty difficult, but if you do have one, or if you are able to get one, it does cover all of Toxicroak's weaknesses in a really big way. Like, all 4 of these Pokemon don't really have much of a prayer against a SmackDown Tyranitar. Tyranitar handling all the stuff that Toxicroak can't, Toxicroak handling everything else. Pretty good duo core right there. Next Omega pick that I can recommend to you guys is Skuntank. So having dark typing is really good because it gets rid of poison types, psychic type weakness, and then it also gives you resistances to dark and ghost type attacks, which are very powerful in this cup. And then the poison typing takes care of dark types, fighting, and fairy type weaknesses. So it's just a general overall solid dual typing specifically for the Twilight Cup. I feel like out of the poison darks that exist, which is, Alolan Muck and Skuntank here, I feel like Skuntank has the better move pool because it has the lower energy cost attacks. So there could be reasons to want to use Alolan Muck or just general regular Muck itself, but I feel like as far as the general meta goes, Skuntank is definitely the best pick of the 3. Then after Skuntank, the 4th great pick I have for you guys for the Twilight Cup is going to be Alolan Ninetales. Originally, Golbat was the best of this lot, like the best of this group, because the rest of this group didn't really exist. But then Niantic updated the game, and now the rest of the group exists, and everyone in this group basically beats Golbat and does Golbat's job, so Golbat is a little bit, kind of a lot weaker than it was previously. I feel like the champion of this group is definitely Alolan Ninetales. With all the buffs that it has, it's able to womp a ton of things in this meta. Now, one thing you might notice right away is Alolan Ninetales doesn't have exactly a dominating matchup against Toxicroak. It does have some trouble with Tyranitar because Tyranitar's got Smackdown, and it definitely has some problems with the Skuntank here. Alolan Ninetales is a Pokemon that definitely is not without vulnerabilities, but against everything else in these groups that aren't those Pokemon, Alolan Ninetales has a relative advantage over them. So definitely a very powerful Pokemon, very powerful Psyshock there. Dazzling Gleam got buffed, so no reason to not use that. And then for the fast move, Powder Snow. So yeah, very excellent Pokemon, will serve you well, but definitely does have some key weaknesses that you should be mindful of. Then the final Pokemon of the Twilight Cup that I can recommend to you guys, yeah, I'm giving you 5 instead of 6, deal with it, is Tentacruel. And Tentacruel, I feel, is like kind of the hidden master of the Twilight Cup. So big thing Tentacruel has going on for it, aside from being John Hankey's favorite Pokemon, is that it's got these really high energy cost charge moves that deal a ton of damage that are able to OHKO basically everything in the Twilight Cup. Big problem with it is that it's slow to get to those moves, but the payoff is pretty excellent. Now, in other leagues and cups, I criticize Pokemon that have this type of strategy. For example, Kyogre and Palkia do this thing in the Master League, and I feel like it kind of limits them a bit. But in the Twilight Cup, the meta is more concentrated, it's more condensed. In the Master League, you could have Pokemon that could directly counter those Pokemon pretty easily, right? So having that nuke attack isn't always a done deal for them. Where in the Twilight Cup, the meta is limited enough where Tentacruel doesn't have as many hang-ups as those Master League Pokemon do. On top of that, Tentacruel is able to dominate other matchups without just nuking them with a single bar charge move. So overall, Tentacruel, very excellent pick for this. So the reason why I feel like Tentacruel is the hidden master of this cup is because while other Pokemon can be countered based off of other picks, Tentacruel is a Pokemon that can only really be countered by having a shield. And because it's the Silph Arena, you can have Tentacruel on your roster, but you don't have to use Tentacruel. So if you're up against your opponent, and your opponent knows about Tentacruel, and they see you've got Tentacruel on your roster, well, that's going to influence their gameplay habit. Now they're going to want to hold on to a shield for the final fight, whether you have a Tentacruel or not, because you might have a Tentacruel. So I feel like that is a really big advantage that a player could have psychologically over their opponent. Alternatively, if you're up against a noob, or somebody that you don't know well enough, maybe they don't know about SwagTips, maybe they don't know about Tentacruel, then you could use Tentacruel in the first round, take them out in the final fight with the Tentacruel, and now they know about Tentacruel. Now they're like, wow, that guy just nuked me at the end, I'm going to save one shield. But then in your second matchup, you don't use Tentacruel, they think you're using Tentacruel, but you ain't, and then you beat them anyways. So I feel like I don't know, beyond just being a really good pick because it can dominate so many Pokemon and because it absolutely dominates when there's no shields involved, beyond just that, I feel like the psychological effect is really big in the Silph Arena. So, yeah, definitely a Pokemon that you'll really want to consider. I'd say of the 5 picks I've given you today, Tentacruel and Toxicroak are probably like the 2 biggest ones that you'll definitely want to have. The other 3 you can maybe play around with. So you might be at home thinking, Ryan, Swag, that's only 5 picks. Come on, what's pick number 6? Build my team for me, Ryan Swag. And I feel like there's too many factors that go into the 6th pick, like why you'd want to pick one or not. So in the second part of this video, hopefully out tomorrow, I'll be going over these other picks and then you can make your own decision for that 6th member. And also keep in mind that if you are using these 5 picks as a cookie cutter type team, just be aware that other people watching SwagTips will have this cookie cutter team in mind when they're building their teams, and it could give them an advantage over you. One Pokemon that I feel does have an advantage over this whole crew is Nidoqueen. I'll cover that more tomorrow, but yeah, you don't want to be stuck at a disadvantage against Nidoqueen, do you? That'd be pretty poopy, wouldn't it? So yeah, just be wary when using cookie cutter teams, and definitely bring your own creativity into the battle, and that could net you some serious wins there. So that's what I got for the Twilight Cup Simplified here, part 1. If you got any questions on this content, comment below, let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out. And if you haven't subscribed to SwagTips already, well, subscribe to SwagTips today. Yeah. SwagTips. So one big thing it has going on for it is that it can OHKO nearly everything in the Twilight Cup with its powerful single bar charge moves. I say single bar, there's no single bar in, like, okay.